Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's PMI Friday webinar, Digital Process Transformation with Rich Seddon. My name is Susanna Clark and I'm facilitating the session today. So this includes running the Q&A desk. The Q&A button you can find on your Zoom toolbar, so we're going to be using it throughout the presentation. Please do post your questions and I'll put them to Rich during the webinar. Today's webinar is being broadcast live on Facebook and LinkedIn, as well as being recorded. So we will send you a link via email early next week to the full recording. And this has both the audio and the presentation you'll be seeing today. To those of you who are joining us on live streams, welcome. To participate in future polls, receive the recording via email and make suggestions for future topics, please do register for our upcoming webinars at pmi.co.uk/webinars. And that's where you'll find the full schedule of events. Finally, from me, before we get underway, after the webinar, we'll be sending everybody a short voice of the customer survey. We'd be really grateful for your feedback, as well as suggestions for future topics for the PMI Friday webinars that you'd like to see us cover. I'd now like to hand over to Rich.
Thanks, Suze. And good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to have so many of you with us. I'm responding. Suze just mentioned the voice of the customer survey there. We're responding already. One of my previous webinars, I was told, please, Rich, sit still. So today I am sitting down instead of using my standing desk. So hopefully that will enhance the experience for everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rich Seddon. I'm managing partner at PMI. You see on screen my contact details, my email and my LinkedIn. Please do feel free to contact me using either of those. Do link in with me and similarly follow the company page at Process Management International too, where you'll see all our latest updates and releases regarding webinars, etc. So digital process transformation, what we're going to cover today. First of all, I'm going to talk about some definitions. Both in terms of perceptions, but also the PMI definition of what we see digital process transformation as being. I'm going to talk about some of the foundations of success and base those on recent project insights. So we're going to get really practical there with the project insights, where I'm going to take you through some examples, where talking about the tools, talking about the benefits of those specific projects that we've been involved in. And finally, we're going to round off with some observations and recommendations. So building those up from the foundations, giving you examples, and then finally bringing it together with what we see as some of the key critical success factors for you. So, background then, digital process transformation. Why this topic? I've been asked this a couple of times recently. And I ran a version of this webinar for the CQI, the Chartered Quality Institute, last week. And the question came up then, why digital process transformation? So the answer is fairly simple in that it's a topic, as the first point in my, my bullets on the right there suggest, it's a topic that's going up in terms of popularity. So organizational awareness, competitive pressures, and in our observation, the fear of being left behind is increasing too. So what about the cost? Well, to be honest, it's highly variable. It depends on the type of solution, and you'll see some of those the tools that we discuss as we progress through the webinar. But as a general rule, the cost is coming down. Now that places a whole new set of tools in a whole new set of hands. And one of the things I keep talking about is the democratization of automation tools and digital tools. So we'll talk about some examples of that shortly. But you'll hear me refer to that democratization. And what I mean is that it's being driven by the cost and availability. And the fact, as the last point on this slide suggests, these tools are no longer in the hands of the IT department alone. So the stakes of digital process transformation and automation can be high, but as you'll see through this presentation, hopefully, they don't need to be. And what about the prospect of doing nothing and ignoring this stuff? Yeah, the proverbial fingers in the ears. Frankly, it's unlikely to be a viable option. I could go further with that and suggest it's impossible. One of the real examples that, one of the very tangible examples that I've been using recently is those of you that use Microsoft's latest browser, Microsoft Edge, Chromium, which is the latest version of what used to be Internet Explorer, may or may not have noticed in the last few weeks, the latest update, a little chevron has appeared, a little grey-blue chevron has appeared to the right of your address bar. Now, depending on your company's rollout policies, that is an automation tool that used to be reserved for high profile, high cost, high stakes robotic process automation projects. It's now in the hands, in the browser, on millions, possibly billions of computers worldwide, a screen recording functionality to automate routine tasks. Doesn't sound that exciting, but it really is. Now, please don't distract yourself. Stop clicking on it now. I can see what you're up to. Stick with me on the webinar, and I'll talk about that example rather than automating routines as we go through. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier on, getting practical. This is no longer the job of the IT department. So what do I mean by that? Here's our definition, the PMI definition of what digital process transformation is. It is the use of digital technologies to create improved business processes that enhance efficiency, effectiveness, so far so good, and customer experience. So it's not one or the other, it's all three of those together. And in our experience, very often, these three have not been combined, and there's not enough focus on the combination of all three of these. Now, why? So the efficiency and effectiveness are fairly straightforward things, as is customer experience in terms of concepts to grasp, but we often don't put them together. So one of the examples I talk through here quite often with digitization and digital tools is cast your mind back to the growth of internet shopping when we all started first using it. This led to a mass and very, very rapid development of the parcel freight industry, particularly the consumer parcel freight industry. Small packages were very used to getting them delivered, and heads up, no doubt I'm going to be interrupted. I can see in the corner of my eye an Amazon delivery on this subject will no doubt ring my doorbell very shortly and interrupt us. I promise to stick with us and ignore it. However, back to the plot. So the massive growth in the consumer parcel delivery business, which required a whole new set of digital tools and digital processes. And very early on, those examples focused very much on effectiveness and efficiency. So you grow your business and your parcel consumer business, grow it rapidly. Lots of inefficiency gets built into the process. So one of the uses of the digital process transformation tools early on was to keep the customer informed, and simple stuff like sending emails, letting you know when your parcel was delivered and was going to be delivered. You get a notification, great, parcel going to be delivered. And the emphasis of that, or the intention of that, was to improve the effectiveness and efficiency that consumers are more likely to be in if they've been warned when the parcel is going to turn up. Okay, great. Really basic stuff. However, at that point, when this first came around, customer experience wasn't really factored into this. It was a push process, if you like. And when the consumer got the email saying that a parcel was going to be delivered, there was nothing you could do about it. And certainly many European operations, you ended up having to go to the depot yourself to go and collect it, and then get all the complexity of getting access to those facilities and reception desks and so on and so forth. Nowhere in that process was factored in the customer experience. Move that on to today, how those digital tools are being used more effectively. The more developed processes, one of the big ones that many of you will be familiar with is DPD's processes. Not only do you get the alert telling you when your parcel is going to be delivered, you can click on it and see live where the tracking of the van is actually in real time, but you also get options to interact with it, to suggest you want it delivered at a different time to a different place, not to the creepy neighbor on the other side of the road, left in a safe place, rearrange another delivery slot. Now that's factoring in all three of these because that's more efficient, it's more effective, and the customer experience is taken into account. It's a very simple example, but it's one that I think helps exemplify this model on the right-hand side of the screen. So what are some of these tools we're talking about? A raft of them, in short. We're going to be particularly focusing today on the bottom right-hand side of this screen, the artificial intelligence and robotic process automation and process automation technologies, because they're often the most relevant, most visible expression of them. But let's just run through these quickly. Traditional, so-called traditional web technologies, web-based platforms that you're all familiar with using, interfaces, internet shopping, that kind of stuff. The Internet of Things, the connected device, massive growth in this area, both in the consumer and industrial sector. So in the industrial sector, the connectivity of machines, of tooling, of equipment, in order to collect data and status and all that kind of stuff. And then in the consumer environment, I'm sure many of you are familiar with devices for such as webcams that you can have at home, automated webcams. I'm the not so keen owner of a internet connected tumble dryer. I'm not expressing any opinion on the usefulness of these things, by the way. And then you've got augmented reality. Particularly, we're seeing this grow quite a lot at the moment in both consumer markets and also factory environments. Factory environments, we're seeing it used for guiding product routing. So it's usually visor-based to overlay, or it can be screen-based to overlay digital visual structures onto the real environment that you can see. So in a consumer environment, you'll see it now, particularly furniture stores are developing this, furniture retailers. Where we're seeing you can hold up your mobile phone to your room with the camera and it will place the piece of furniture in an augmented reality fashion in the area of the room. Developing technologies, expect much more of that as it progresses. Now, what does that mean to the business improvement industry and the business improvement professional? To think about that, and we'll talk some more about that later. Big data, great topic, loads of different interpretations as to what that means. Frankly, in this context, we're talking about big data and cloud-based services as being the back end of some of this stuff you'll see, which is why I'm talking about suggesting that we'll focus on the bottom right of this. 3D printing can be considered one of the solutions in this area, particularly subcomponent manufacturing. It is transforming it right now. The speed and agility of being able to fabricate using 3D printing technologies, subcomponents in manufacturing processes is transforming it right now. Mobile technologies, we're all very familiar with many of those and heavily embedded in our lives in all kinds of aspects. Again, tends to be a front end of many of the things we're going to talk about today. Cloud-based services, I touched on with the big data, and then it takes me down to the final 2 points, machine learning and process automation. So these two are often heavily connected, or one is an output of the other. The process automation tools are where we're going to focus a lot of our attention today. RPA is robotic process automation, probably the first manifestation of automation. The big process, big repeat process, things like call center processes, banking transactions, repeat on scale, digitally automated processes, typically called RPA. And then you've got the new generation of tools, such as the one I mentioned that's been released by Microsoft that's in the browser, which is part of a whole suite of the Power Platform, which I'll talk to you about shortly, and we'll give some example projects of that. So that's just some of the context of this. Now, I'd really like to hear about your experience. So we're going to have a poll here, and hopefully my co-facilitator here, there we go, it's on screen now. 3 questions we're asking you. My organization has recent or current experience of digital transformation? Yes, no. My organization has delivered at least one digital process transformation project that has been successful. And 3, my organization has delivered at least one digital process transformation project that has failed in part or entirely. Okay, so that's on screen now, so please do consider your answers and let us see. This is a bit about context is what we're interested in here, to find out what your experience is. And as I've run this webinar a couple of times in versions of it, I'm really interested to see the difference between different audiences. So let's see what we get today.
So at the moment, it's great because we've definitely got some people who've got some experience currently, and also people who've got varying degrees of experience on projects that they've run in the past and how successful those have been. So I'm just going to give that another 10 seconds or so, and then I will draw that to the close. So if you would like to just cast your votes, give us your input, that would be great. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just going to share those results on the screen now.
Okay, excellent. So in response to question 1, my organization has recent or current. We've got the vast majority saying yes and very few saying no. Interesting. So that's the highest proportion I've seen so far. That's be very interesting to understand why that might be, and do share your comments in the chat. So my organization has delivered 1. Yeah, okay, as you'd expect with that answer. Fantastic. And what about question 3? Okay, so a high proportion, 59%, have delivered, of organizations responded here, have delivered at least one digital process transformation project that has failed in part or entirely. Again, that's the highest result I've seen as well. And that brings me back to my original point on slide 1, where I talked about the stakes being high, but do they need to be? And I think that is not only, it's two factors at play there. Not only is the adaptation and understanding and implementation of these things improving, the tools themselves are improving as well. And I'll talk about that shortly when we talk about the approach that I'm recommending and advocating of safe experimentation.
Okay,
great.
thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Suze. Thank you very much, everyone, for responding on that. So let's have a look at some insights for success. Here's the key foundation. Strategic goals plus voice of the customer plus process knowledge. Now, what do I mean by that? The strategic goals are not the strategic goals of a project, of an automation or digital transformation project. These are the strategic goals of the organization. Understanding where a digital process transformation project fits in relation to the organization's goals. Not just the objectives of the project, but where is the strategic fit. It is so often overlooked, and I'll talk about why shortly. Combine that, when you've got that fit, where's the direct line of sight with the strategy? Combine that, with the voice of the customer. So where is the customer in this automation? And then, and only then, overlay the process knowledge. So the operation of the process as encountered by the people that actually operate it. Not the assumed knowledge of a third-party project team, but the actual knowledge of those that operate it. We've described these as the key foundations because they're all too often overlooked. Either one or the other is concentrated on, but frankly, the thing that comes way over the top of this, more often than not, and I think it may explain, it'd be interesting to hear, do let us know in the chat, why some of these projects fail is because system functionality so often comes first. I.e., the technology is capable of doing something, so let's put it to use. We don't clearly identify where it fits with the strategic goals. We don't understand where the voice of the customer features in this. How is the customer going to benefit? Think back to that three-part model with the customer experience in there. So efficiency, effectiveness, and the customer experience. Where's the customer's voice? And then who knows how this process operates today and how it could operate in the future. And those people that are going to be responsible for it going forward, getting them involved in the project. Put that in bold text, big pluses. I know it's a simple model, but these are the 3 most common things that are missed, and that may contribute to some of the failures that your organizations have encountered. Be really keen to hear from you if that is the case. Do let us know. So this is a PMI webinar. It would be remiss of me not to have the 3-question model and PDSA in here, but it works. One of the things I often say here is don't treat digital process transformation projects as any different to any other transformation project. At the end of the day, we're trying to improve processes. The technology is a means to an end. It's part of the solution. And that comes back to this point around functionality should not lead the way. It's an enabler. And viewing it through that lens, I think, is really helpful. So the 3-question model. Question 1, being clear up front, what are we trying to accomplish? Question 2, how will we know that a change is an improvement? In order to do this, it demands theories and prediction before action. Before action. Particularly with technology solutions, we dive straight in. The system's capable of this, implement it, get it done. And that's so often, in my experience, why things can start coming off the rails. And then and only then, when you answer questions 1 and 2, can you address this question 3. What changes can we make that will result in improvement? And remember the previous slide. Customer voice, strategic fit, and process knowledge all play a part in answering that 3rd question, and doing so as rapidly as possible in order to respond effectively. Suze, I can see we've got a question.
Yes, indeed. So I've got a question from Dave, who says, in my organisation, this is very much driven by IT. So how do you recommend I engage with my IT department to have this conversation? Because right now, that's not happening.
So the next slide will probably illuminate this a bit more, Dave. There's several sections on here on the next slide that I think will help. So the top line answer to your question is apply the basics. These things that I'm talking about now, and actually going to IT with some of the solutions worked out. So understanding the voice of the customer and how it fits into this process, understanding the link between that and the strategic goals. And then my next slide, it's actually a great link, Dave, thank you, splits this into understand and measure. So let me step you through these, and I think it'll provide the answer to your question.
Thanks, Rich. And thank you, Dave.
Yes, thank you. Great link. Have you seen my slides, Dave? Okay, so discipline enables success is the title of this slide. And this is part, so take that engagement question there just came in. Taking this out of the hands of IT, I'm using it a little elaborately. The IT functionality and the IT functions are an enabler to this. They're a critical enabler to this. But let's think about this. So you're digitally transforming a process. Define the purpose of the process. Not just define how this new process is going to look, but define what the purpose of this process is. Identify those major steps and activities, identify the stakeholders, the ownerships, the functions, understand the customer relationships and supplier relationships within it, and identifying inputs and outputs at every stage. Okay, basic stuff, yeah? Stuff we do every day. But for some reason, digital projects are very often treated differently. So think about what you're going to measure here as a means of further addressing that. You're going to identify the process measures, the current performance data, what the goal performance is, sources of variation and waste, and impact on performance. So hopefully what you're getting here is this about that first word there in the title, discipline in using the business improvement tools is absolutely relevant, and it can be a key enabler to success of digital process transformation tools. And they don't need to be treated differently. On that note, how to approach it. PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act, for those of you who are not familiar with it. The psychology behind this model is as important as ever in a digital environment. Quickly developing theories, responding to those, testing those theories and responding to them, so planning, doing, study, and acting upon them, enables your digital solutions and your digital process transformation to better meet the needs of the organization and the needs of the customer, because it creates agility in your processes and your method of deployment. And one of the key things that I think has really helped this is the democratization that I talked about earlier on. The tools have become simpler. They've become easier to implement. They've become more available. That comes with its own challenges, though. It can introduce a lack of visibility, which I'll talk about later on, and difficulty of control. So I'll refer to that in some of the other factors. Before I do that, I would like to talk about a recent example. So recent project of ours. This is a subcomponent manufacturing company running a 25-year-old bespoke manufacturing system. Absolutely horrendous to use, but did the job. Really poor user interface. Very few functions actually capable within the system, but it tracked the product through the factory and was able to do the basic stuff they needed it to do, and there was no organizational desire to replace it. So in that context, there's data being stored somewhere, but the process particularly that we talked here about digitally transforming and automating was just one little corner of the factory where one team leader spent 8 hours a week, typically, on collecting production data, which he then shared out by email. Went up, went down, went sideways to his colleagues, to his bosses, to the shop floor. He drew the data off the system, he retyped it into a spreadsheet, sent it out by email. Something we can all relate to, yeah? Fairly straightforward. But my question here is, what value is that per team leader adding when he's doing that? So the project we implemented here was to use the current data in simple new ways. And you'll hear that message a lot from me today, simple new ways. So the solution was using 3 pieces of technology: Excel, Power Pivot, and Power Automate, all Microsoft products. The Excel data and Power Pivot was simply a routine to access and query the 25-year-old manufacturing system, simply giving it access to a data source. By using Power Pivot, which is an onboard tool within Excel, you're able to access different data sources. So rather than him going up and running his query manually and retyping it out, the spreadsheet itself does the query. And then it's distributed using a Power Automate routine. Now, forgive the logos here. Microsoft changed the logos every 20 minutes, and I'm aware they have changed them in the last literally few hours. So the Power Automate logo, it's all part of the Office 365 suite. So in this new world, the data was accessed automatically, and then it was distributed, again automatically by email, with no human intervention necessary. So the time could be spent analyzing the results and what the message and the lessons the data had to give, rather than just preparing it. So it's come back to that three element model again: the efficiency, effectiveness, and the customer experience. Where did that fit in this world? Okay, so efficiency, we can see bang right there, 8 hours a week saved, just in one little corner of the factory. This was not a major project. Effectiveness, avoidable errors were totally eliminated. Because the Excel was reading the data source directly, there was no retyping necessary. So we completely eliminated the opportunity for human error to be added. Then the customer experience isn't immediately obvious in this world, but by using the good old flowcharting tools to make sure we understood who the customers of this process were, it was illuminated that this report that was emailed out found its way via purchasing to the customer service team, and they were using the dates in there to make promises to customers as to for delivery dates. So making promised order delivery dates. Completely unexpected. This guy that ran this little process every week, every day of every week, didn't even know it was used in that way. But the data it provided effectively said what they were doing down in the subsidiary would lead to the end product being available on a certain date. Customer experience, the customer service team were using it. So by implementing this technology, customer order promise date accuracy improved by 52%, which is a combination of A, it was done faster, B, the errors were being avoided, and it was automatically distributed into the hands of the customer service team, so they had the data at their fingertips and didn't need to request it from procurement. Simple Microsoft tools that enabled this to be completely different and had an impact on all three of these areas: efficiency, effectiveness, and the customer experience. So with that in mind, let's move on to another poll. I'm interested to understand, back to Dave's question, this relates to, in your organization, would the responsibility for digital process transformation belong to IT, the business improvement team, or elsewhere? I've also given you a fourth chance there. It doesn't sit anywhere. So you should hopefully now see that polling on screen. And I can see people are starting to respond.
Yeah, that polling's launched and responses are coming in. So it seems to be a bit of an early fight between IT and the business improvement team, but great to see the business improvement team being involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I've also just been asked a question about whether a particular customer does have these apps available, and I can tell you that you do. And if you want to get in touch with me, I can directly, I can tell you a bit more about that, but I can also put you in touch with the right person for you to talk to.
Okay. I'm going to pretend I understood that. Fantastic.
That was for Deborah, and Deborah says thanks. So you've got them.
Good.
Okay, so I'm just going to give it another couple of seconds and then we will end polling. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers, everyone. So those results should be on screen now. And what we can see is a clear positioning with the business improvement team, which is fantastic to hear. That, as I've been asking this question or a very slight variance on it over recent years, this has become the picture that is fairly consistently painted. One caveat I'd place on that in my observations is it depends if there is a major project going on. So such as replacing an ERP system or something like that. In which case the sway tends to jump over to the IT department. But it's great to see, and frankly, that is where it should be. Over time, and this is a real challenge for business improvement teams, and those of you who are members of lean business improvement teams, etc., these tools are going to be in the hands of the everyday users. And one of the questions I'm going to pose in 2 slides' time is, what about the skills that are required in order to do that, of yourselves as a business improvement team and of the individuals doing it, in order to achieve a safe, robust, and high quality output. Okay, thanks, Suze.
That's okay. I've also got another question. And sorry, one observation I was going to make, which is, of course, it depends on the organization and whether they do have a business improvement team. You know, many of the smaller, medium-sized companies don't actually have a dedicated improvement team. So that's just something to be aware of too. Okay, so the question that I've been asked by Carl is, we have an RPA team in IT and a process automation team outside of IT in a digital business transformation team. Should these ideally sit together, or does it matter?
So it's a great question, Carl, and one I saw very recently with a client of ours. In that it depends on the circumstance and the particular context. But in the example that I saw recently, we did put them together, and I advised the leadership team to combine those in order to coordinate the effort. Increasingly, many of the RPA tools are changing, and the implementation of some elements of their work is falling into the digital business transformation type tools, these democratized tools, as I'm suggesting they could be called. So my highly caveated answer would be yes. but I'd need to understand the circumstances. And I would say yes, because of the coordination that it gives you and the ability to make the two work in tandem with one another rather than separate wings and separate arms. That said, it may not be appropriate in your setting, but I'm very happy to chat that through. If you do want to, drop me a line. Be very happy to chat through.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Thanks,
Thanks, Sid.
Carl.
Factors for success. New risks. Does digital process transformation offer new risks? Absolutely. It can offer gains, but you need to be aware of risks. And anyone that attended my webinar on decision making a few weeks ago would recognize a definition I put in that webinar about around risk, and risk being that which you can measure. Anything else is uncertainty, and do recognize the difference, and I think that is useful in this context as well. So you're not done. Too often in my experience, these kind of projects and digital process transformation projects are considered a one-off activity. And let's face it, with most IT implementations, we can't wait for it to be over. So we want it to be a one-off activity. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, that world is changing. As with all effective improvement, these processes will need to be measured, monitored, and continuously improved, not just left to atrophy. Because even though they're electronic, they will still atrophy. In fact, there's even more scope for it because human eyes aren't on it all that often. And you'll see that a lot with consumer-facing processes, particularly communications processes. You really need to have a review process in order to continually improve them, to make sure that the messages that are going out to customers, for example, are still correct. I had a great example with a utilities provider. Actually, it's in personal context rather than a work context. A few weeks ago, automated communications coming out with some factually incorrect material in them. And that's a result of it sitting in the back end somewhere without a proper, robust review process. All stuff that's good, traditional business improvement team type activity. So the fear of change with this stuff, embrace the fear would be my advice. It will exist, don't pretend it won't do. Work with it and turn it into an asset, but never ignore it. Some of these tools are pretty scary when they're affecting your day-to-day work, particularly when you come to automate something that someone does. So take that example I talked about earlier on with the guy, the team leader doing his analysis. He felt he was adding value there, but upon examination, and was quite reluctant to engage in this, but upon examination, he wasn't adding any value. And once he could see that he could add value through analyzing and actually managing his team instead of filling in this data every day and getting it wrong, he recognized the change and really became a great advocate of it. So, ready for it, this question. Is your business ready and able to allow the rapid deployment of new processes? Bear in mind, this is factors to success. These tools should not, the implementation and testing of these tools should not drag on forever. And in order to be able to answer that question, is your organization ready for it? You must explore that. And in order to explore it, you need to test. And the beauty of these, particularly the new process automation tools that I keep referring to, is that testing them and experimenting with them is easier than it has ever been before. Clarity and speed. Be clear on your governance process. I mentioned earlier on a topic around visibility. Many of these things can become invisible, particularly if you're talking about the Microsoft suite. From a process governance point of view, if that's your bag, it can be quite alarming. So you need an agile and a capable governance process. But bear this in mind, if every decision has to go through multi-layers of management or multi-change processes, issues cannot be detected and corrected quickly. Skills development, mentioned that previously. Don't just assume because some of these things have appeared in browsers and it's an intriguing thing Microsoft have done, that your users will be able to use it. They could make a real mess of some of these processes if they're not appropriately skilled. So my advice to address that is to do some experimentation. Train an initial team of people in using some of these tools with support of your IT teams, and learn what learning is necessary, but don't assume that they can just do it because it's now in their browser or it's in Office 365. It can be disheartening for them. It can also be quite damaging if they do the automation in the wrong way. So let's think about another different example this time. This time a professional services company with a modern ERP system, enterprise resource planning system, doing everything from soup to nuts, invoicing to planning. So this was replacing a manual customer onboarding process where forms were emailed out and returned back to the two new customers. The use of the digital tools enabled faster turnaround times with fewer mistakes. So let's think about how they did that. 3 tools in question this time: Dynamics 365, which is Microsoft's big ERP and CRM solution. Adobe Sign, electronic signatures, DocuSign's another alternative. And again, Microsoft Power Automate here. So in this example, the CRM system was being used to automate the distribution and return of customer onboarding documentation. So upfront, a process was launched, automatically emails out the relevant pieces of documentation to the individuals, tracks their return, gets them signed, and escalates where necessary, all controlled by Power Automate in the background. So think about efficiency, effectiveness, and customer experience again. In this example, in the efficiency context, turnaround of these documentation was reduced from a mean of 11 days to 4 hours. Effectiveness, first-time returns without chasing improved from 20% to 90%. And the customer experience, well, when surveyed, the customer sentiment from the onboarding process itself, who'd have thought something as mundane as onboarding could influence customer perception, but it does, and sets a great out of the blocks first examples if you get it right. Change from 45, a detractor in the net promoter scoring system, to 80 plus a promoter. So they created a promoter out of something as mundane as an onboarding process. Interesting, using simple tools at very low cost. Oh, hello. I've got a question there. I wasn't looking at you over there.
Hello. So I've got a question from Daryl, who says, would you advocate commencing a transformation project on the key strategic aim, or start on a smaller project to demonstrate how it can be done and apply lessons learned to the bigger project?
Smaller, without a doubt. I can say that. Look into the camera. Confidence, yes, smaller. Start small, definitely. With this stuff, it's about experimentation. It's about learning. You think about that slide I just put up, about the skills you require. Are you ready for change? That's an assessment you have to make for yourself. So I would be highly dubious of a starting point being a total transformation as the starting point. Start small, learn. That doesn't mean go slow. And that's often what is confused. If you say that to many leadership teams, that you want to start small, it's recognized that you're not going fast. That is fundamentally incorrect and a misunderstanding of the approach that I'm advocating. Using PDSA, you can go fast. You just do it safely.
Okay, and I've got one other question from Joe, who says, in your experience, is there a particular business function that's a good place to start?
No, it can be applied anywhere.
Okay.
Have your antennae up, looking for opportunities on which to experiment. There is no one particular area that stands out. The examples I've just given you there was a corner of a frankly very grotty manufacturing facility, and through to a first-rate professional services business. Very, very different environments, very different settings. Not necessarily, yeah, there's no rule of thumb at all to go by.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
And thank you to Joe and to Daryl.
Thank you both. So back to some factors for success. Identifying talent. It can be found in some of the most unlikely places, as with all business improvement projects. But spreading the responsibility and using some of these digital tools as a development opportunity for people is really valuable. Ask the questions: who wants to be involved? Volunteer people if you need to. Let them try it out and experiment with it. They can be very, very satisfying for most unlikely people. So do understand that, and don't just assume that it's the usual suspects, or necessarily people with a load of experience in this area. Being prepared to change course. We've talked about the agility and needing to be able to flex as you go forward. The agility and willingness to change course are crucial to success. And when I mentioned the stakes being high up front in this webinar, this is kind of what I was talking about. Often with big IT projects, we're in too deep. It's too late to change direction, and no one has the appetite for it. A lot of the digital automation tools that I'm talking about here give you the ability to start small and fragment the actual work packages, so you're not facing such a large risk. And that gives you the ability to change course. But change is a psychological thing. You need to be ready to do that and prepared to, and not view it as a failure if you do change course. And I've kind of referred to this throughout. Big IT may not be the answer. Understand the art of the possible. Back to Dave's question earlier on, based on the problem you're trying to solve, and don't be led by the system functionality. Time and time again, I see the starting point of these projects as what can the system do, and then fit the business to the system. It doesn't need to be that way these days, and it shouldn't be the way, and that methodology has been disproved time and time again. So do understand the process, do understand the voice of the customer, understand the strategic fit, and how that can be married to functionality, and how functionality can enable performance improvement, not the other way around. So another example, the final example, is a multi-site retailer. And this is several hundred stores, retail stores, conducting status checks on things like store condition, product condition, equipment condition throughout the day. Through documenting this process and understanding the performance of the process and putting some process measures in, we identified there were thousands of checks done in each store each day. Checking things are okay. Or were they? These checks, it was revealed upon detailed work studies, were often just a token gesture. It was literally a paper-based checkbox. I have done this, I have done this, I have done this, I have done this. Which included the shift handovers, but constant cycle. Some of the stores, very long opening hours, happening throughout the day. It was clear that the effectiveness of that process was substandard, and its purpose, which was to improve store standards, was being missed. So we put together a digital process confirmation tool whereby the digital technologies were integrated into the daily work rather than being a checking process. So in order to perform the task, you had to use the digital tool, which as an after result automatically did the checking reporting for you, so the task status reporting. And that was coupled with automated dashboards and exceptions escalations. So what did we use here? Again, Dynamics 365 controlling the data, Power Automate managing the workflows, Power BI from Microsoft again, being the dashboarding tool to show the digital dashboards, and Power Apps to be the mobile-based interface where the data was collected in the first place by the staff in the stores. So efficiency, effectiveness, customer experience, let's think about those again. So thousands of hours were saved in execution time by understanding the process and understanding the performance of the current process before embarking upon this. We identified and measured the number of hours that were being spent filling in these checkboxes, scanning them, inputting them into spreadsheets, emailing them to supervisors, emailing them to someone else in a central operations team, who then compiled it into a monthly report, who then escalated it to the board. When all of this, by the time it got all reported, was so meaningless, no one was ever looking at it. There was no means of reporting and acting upon escalations where they needed to be. It was just a checking process, adding very, very little value for the organization, or most interesting, their customers. So thousands of hours of execution time was saved. Product availability, i.e. stock on shelves, because the tools were implemented into the day-to-day work without anyone having to do a checking process, product availability improved 15%. Now, anyone in retail will know that was a massive gain. It represents a very low bar where they were coming from, but a huge gain. If the product's not on the shelves in a physical or virtual retail environment, your customers cannot buy it and you miss the sale. Customer experience, customer standards compliance, key measure in retail, improved 350%. This was a knock it out the park project using off-the-shelf digital Microsoft tools that require skill and technical expertise to implement. But in terms of the approach, it fits entirely with the methodology that I've described already. So let's see that for real here. So this is the PMI Performance Genius product, which is built on those examples that I've just talked to you about. So on the left, we have the Power Apps interface. So what a user would typically see: ready for business checklists, work in progress confirmation, daily warehouse standards, afternoon shift handovers. So that's built in Power Apps. In the middle, you've got the Dynamics 365 and Power Automate controlling the data and performing escalations. Things like fridge temperatures requiring actions, front of house standards being below expected standard, equipment breakdown, insufficient WIP. These are in-process and results measures built into the system so that you can actually act on the things that need act upon and detect. Often I describe this about fingertip sensitivity, being able to have sensitivity to the areas you need to respond to. And that's what this does. And then finally on the right, you've got the Power BI dashboards. In this example, we're showing it on a tablet. So feeding through those elements: Power Apps on the left, Dynamics 365 in the middle, Power BI on the right there. A real tangible expression making a difference to the daily work that people are doing. So no more checklists needing to be manually entered and sent off. And the beauty of this, which you can start small. You can start on one process, so just the ready for business checklist. And that would be the process and the method that we would advocate. Okay, so in summary, hopefully you've got the message that the tried and tested improvement tools will serve you well. Let's not treat them differently just because this is digital stuff. Let the business and customer needs you've identified, which necessitates them to be identified first, lead you, not the system functionality. Work out how you're going to experiment safely. One process, one area, one function, one store, even one corner of the factory. Invest the time to do it and be clear on the customer impact so you too can tell stories like I'm doing now of the success in your business of these and the failures for that matter of how this stuff works and what it can mean to you. Use digitization as an opportunity to improve the work itself and the outcomes for the customer. And finally, and most importantly, don't confuse change with improvement. Okay, so moving on. Thank you very much for joining us. You saw my LinkedIn details earlier on. Just before we close out, we have, you may have seen on our LinkedIn and social media channels, any public green belt, black belt, master black belt course, we have fully virtualized and are operating in a virtual classroom using some of these digital tools you've seen today. We have recognized the value of an additional device being available for use during the classroom courses. So as such, we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're providing everyone that books one of those courses with a 2020 Apple iPad to use, which is then yours to keep at the end of the course. So please do have a look at the training landing page. You can see the details there, find it from our homepage. And yeah, that's available now. First deliveries happened today, ready for the course next week, and we're very happy to be able to do this for people.
Thanks, Rich. So just a final reminder from me, look out for our Voice of the Customer survey. You'll be receiving that shortly, and we really are grateful if you can give us your feedback. It's how we learn. And
how I stayed still.
It's how you stay still. Very impressed, Rich. And obviously, we're really interested in your suggestions. So, we drive our topics based upon your feedback. So please let us know what you'd like us to cover for future events. So that really brings us to the end of today's webinar. So on behalf of PMI, Rich and myself, I'd like to thank you all for joining us and wish you a very safe and relaxing weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful to have you with us.